The room smelled like fresh paint and desperation. It was a co-working space downtown, one of those trendy open-floor offices with beanbags in the corner, motivational posters on the walls, and whiteboards filled with diagrams and buzzwords that didn't really mean anything. The team sat around a scratched wooden table, their laptops open, faces glowing in the blue light. They weren't tired exactly. Adrenaline kept them from feeling anything like that, but there was a heaviness in the air, a sense that they were building something fragile and possibly doomed. It had started, as these things often do, with a dream. Max was the first one to pitch it, a platform that would revolutionize the way small businesses handle logistics. He didn't know much about logistics, but he knew about hype. He had watched other founders raise millions on little more than slideshows and big smiles, and he figured he could do the same. His friends, who would later become his co-founders, were good at different things. Lila could code, at least enough to make something that looked like it worked. And Arjun had a gift for saying things that made investors sit up straighter, nodding, already imagining the hockey stick growth curve they would scribble on the back of a napkin. At first, the three of them worked out of Max's apartment. They built a prototype, if you could call it that, and put together a deck full of charts they made up on a Sunday afternoon. By the time they pitched their first angel investor, they had a name, a logo, and a vision so big it practically blinded anyone who looked at it. The investor didn't even ask too many questions. He just liked their energy. He wrote a check on the spot, and that was the beginning. The money gave them permission to dream bigger, to rent the office, to hire interns, to post photos on social media that made it look like they were running something real. Perception is reality, Max liked to say, grinning as he posed next to a borrowed Tesla for their company Instagram. Their user numbers were tiny, barely in the hundreds, but every time they talked about growth, they used percentages instead. Investors loved percentages. "We're growing at 500% month over month," Arjun would say, and no one asked if that meant they'd gone from 5 users to 25. They learned quickly that success wasn't always about what you built, it was about what you made people believe. They announced partnerships with companies that had never signed anything more formal than a handshake. They released fake product updates just to look busy. When journalists came sniffing around, they gave them tours of the office and made sure to have their screens open to dashboards filled with made-up numbers. The scam wasn't malicious, at least not at first. It was survival. They told themselves everyone in the startup world was faking it until they made it. The problem was they never stopped faking. The money kept coming, seed round, then Series A, and with each new infusion of cash, the hole they dug got deeper. They hired real employees now, people who believed in the mission, who worked late nights thinking they were changing the world. Max began to feel a kind of weight pressing on his chest every time he walked into the office. Things started to crack when one of their fake partnerships called them out publicly. A competitor's CEO posted a thread online accusing them of lying about user numbers, and suddenly investors were asking for proof. The dashboards they had once used to impress were now liabilities. Lila stayed up 3 nights in a row building scripts to generate fake data in real time, but even she knew it wouldn't hold forever. The breaking point came during a pitch meeting with a major venture capital firm. They had prepared their most polished presentation yet, complete with glossy videos and an animated graph that climbed so high it seemed to pierce the clouds. The partner at the firm listened politely, nodding along, but when it was over, he didn't clap or smile. He just asked one question: "Can I talk to 5 of your customers?" There was no good answer to that. Within weeks, the story was everywhere. Articles labeled them frauds, think pieces dissected their rise and fall, and Twitter turned their company name into a punchline. Investors pulled out. The office emptied, the beanbags and whiteboards abandoned. Max stayed behind one night after everyone had gone home. He sat at the same scratched wooden table where it had all begun, staring at his laptop screen as emails from lawyers poured in. For a long time, he just sat there, letting the silence fill the space. He thought about the first night they had celebrated their first check, the champagne they couldn't afford but bought anyway, the way they had laughed like nothing could touch them. Somewhere along the way, they had convinced themselves that what they were doing wasn't wrong, that it was just part of the game. But games end, and this one had ended badly. When he finally closed the laptop, the room was completely dark. The city outside kept on glowing, indifferent to what had just collapsed inside that small office. Max stood, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without looking back. Got it. Let's make it longer, darker, and more psychological, diving into the characters' paranoia, guilt, and the slow unraveling of their fake empire. Here's an extended, more intense continuation. Max didn't sleep that night. The apartment felt too small, too quiet, as though the walls themselves were judging him. Every notification sound made him flinch. Every buzz of his phone felt like an accusation. He could still hear Arjun's voice from earlier that day, loud and angry, blaming him for everything. Lila hadn't said much, but that was worse. She had just packed up her laptop, her face pale and unreadable, and walked out. By morning, the first journalists were camping outside the office, snapping photos of employees carrying boxes to their cars. Some of them still hadn't been told what was happening. They found out through the news, reading headlines that called their company the biggest startup lie of the year. Max forced himself to go back to the office one last time. The building felt haunted now. Desks were abandoned, monitors still on, a coffee mug left half full. He walked past the whiteboard where Lila had once sketched their roadmap, the lines now smeared but still visible, ghostly reminders of promises they never kept. Arjun was there too, sitting at the table with a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He looked up as Max entered, his face haggard, his shirt wrinkled. "We could still spin this," Arjun said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We tell them we were pushing aggressive growth strategies. Everyone does it. We just pushed harder." Max didn't answer. He walked to the window, staring out at the skyline. It looked the same as it always had, clean, distant, full of opportunities. But to him, it felt different now. The city was a predator, and they had just been caught in its teeth. "You don't get it," Max finally said. "They're not just going after us for lying to investors. They're going after us for fraud. For wire fraud. We used investor money to fake numbers. That's a crime, Arjun. People go to prison for that." The words hung in the air like smoke. Arjun poured himself another glass but didn't drink. The next few weeks blurred together. Lawyers called daily, their voices clinical, asking for documents, emails, anything that could show intent. Max tried to find a way to protect the interns and junior employees, but there wasn't much he could do. Most of them scattered, trying to salvage their resumes, to distance themselves from the implosion. And then came the paranoia. Max stopped answering his phone. He stopped opening the blinds. Every time a car slowed down outside his apartment, he thought it was the police. He dreamed about handcuffs, about cold metal tables in interrogation rooms, about news anchors reading his name on live TV. Lila came by once, late at night. She stood in his doorway, her eyes rimmed with red. "You should turn yourself in," she said softly. "If you cooperate, maybe they'll go easy on you." Max laughed, a bitter sound that startled even him. "And what about you? You wrote the code that generated the fake data. You think they'll go easy on you?" She didn't answer. She just looked at him for a long time before finally turning and leaving. When the indictment came, it was almost a relief. No more waiting, no more imagining. Just reality. Max sat in the courtroom weeks later, wearing a suit that felt too tight, listening as the charges were read. Wire fraud. Securities fraud. Conspiracy. Each word landed like a hammer. Arjun took a plea deal first. Lila followed. Max held out as long as he could, but eventually he signed too. He would spend years in federal prison. On the last night before sentencing, Max returned to the empty office building one final time. He found the key card still worked. The space was stripped bare now, no beanbags, no desks, no whiteboards. Just a hollow shell. He sat on the floor where the table used to be and closed his eyes, listening to the silence. For a moment, he almost imagined it was the beginning again, that the others were there with him, laughing, planning, believing they were invincible. For a moment, it almost felt like hope. And then it was gone. When he stood and walked out for the last time, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. The scam had never really been about the office or the product or the investors. It had been about them, about their hunger, their ambition, their need to be seen as winners. And that hunger had eaten them alive.